We are all living in tragic realities. But what do I mean by that? The best way to explain something is to simplify it as much as possible because, after all, if something is simple, then it's easier to understand and get a perception of it, right? We're about to be 30 seconds in. Let's dive into the topic. Have you ever lived through the next day, as I'm sure we all have if you're consciously aware enough to watch this video? Have you ever thought about every exact detail of what you'd done the previous day? You probably haven't. And even if you did, I'm gonna have to censor that, but I don't think I got the address. It was just a mailbox number. But even if you did, you probably wouldn't even remember all of it. So let's make it a bit more complicated, but still keep it simple. Now, let's say you spend that whole day with a sibling or a best friend. Let's say you remember a certain part of the day where you kicked the ball over someone's house, but your friend or your sibling says, well, no, if I remember, you kicked it through the window. So we go back to that place the next day and we check. And there's a broken glass on the window, but we see the ball is stuck on the roof. So you may be thinking, well, what's the point? I'll get to the point of this little story. The point was, that same day later on, someone actually was playing baseball, they hit the baseball with the baseball bat and it flew through the window. And my original claim was correct. I kicked the soccer ball up high and it got stuck on the roof. But it's interesting because when you think about how you live your previous days, most of the times you don't even remember. It's almost like when you sleep and wake up, you're in a completely different reality, but everything around you still looks the same. But I'm sure maybe some people experience this once in their lifetime, but have you ever experienced some sort of deja vu where, let's just say, my phone, when I'm using to record this nice area, I'm in a different part of it. Let's say I left it on the table and then I just go to sleep and call it for the day. But then the next morning, I don't find my phone there. My phone is downstairs. Now I know what you may be thinking. You may be saying, well, maybe you moved it down there, or since you live with your grandmother, perhaps she went in there and took it and placed it down there. Which is true. Those are some pretty logical examples. However, sometimes there are no explanations. One great example of being in alternate realities is where you clearly remember saying something to someone and then they tell you that's not what you said something else. And what makes the deja vu even stranger is that one reality, you have a recording of what you said, but they'll still tell you they said something else. And it's just strange how everything is perceived. It's like, for example, you can be watching this video and I can be talking about a meteor that's about to hit the eastern time side of the United States. But you can be checking the news and may not see anything like that. We could be in completely separate realities, but we don't even know. Or one great example is, I remember when I was a kid, it's still very clear to this day. The time was 8 a.m. and I remember arguing with my mother with something. And then I was just so frustrated because I couldn't get my side through. I went back to sleep. I woke up. The time was still almost about 8 a.m. It was 7:30 a.m. instead of 8 a.m. And then I went to talk to my mom and I was like, hey mom, are you okay? I know we had like quite a disagreement back there. And she was like, what disagreement? And I'm like, huh? I'm like, we got into a little fallout, which I don't remember because I was really young, at 8 a.m. And she said, son, it's not 8 a.m. It's 7:30 a.m. And I'm like, what? I'm like, I know for a fact that we got into some disagreement about something. So I know what you're thinking. You're like, well, maybe it's just one of those hyper realistic dreams. But here's the thing that really gave me the deja vu. I remember when heading back to my room after that argument, I cut myself on my left hand. So the first thing I remembered from that reality, I went to look at my hand. The cut was still there. But my mother doesn't remember the argument. So somehow, in some way, I was in another reality. I was participating in another reality. But for some reason, in the reality I woke up in, which was 7:30 a.m. instead of 8 a.m., I still have the cut on my hand, but the argument never even happened. That was like the most clear cases of deja vu that I ever experienced. And I find that pretty strange. You can also apply this to people's different perceptions. For example, in one of Tragic Reality's videos, he said some people will be like, well, find a job find a job that fulfills you, but you can't really put fulfillment and job together. And I actually agree with that. Just mainly because most of these career paths that you can go on is usually the paths that people don't genuinely love. And how I can prove this to anyone, I would ask yourself this. If you couldn't, let's just say your boss cannot pay you, would you still work there at that career if you were not going to get paid? Would you do it for free? If you won't do it for free, you won't love it. But some people can argue and say, well, tragic realities. I still need the money. And I understand that. But people get some things confused between what they're passionate about versus what they like about. Like, for example, I work as a cook at a bowling alley. I like it, but it's not really something that I'm passionate about. And to be honest, I honestly only like it because I only work there on weekends. So I have my Mondays to Thursdays to do whatever I want. As I said in my previous video, when I had that tough talk with my grandma, I'm in a reality where I have that privilege to enjoy that freedom. There's not a lot of children who has that. Some don't even have their parents, let alone their grandmother. But at the same time, it just makes me wonder, if I was working there 6 or 7 days a week, would I even still like that job? Probably not, because I used to work 84 hours a week combined with 2 jobs. One was a fast food restaurant. The other one was a retail. And even though the retail one was really good because I got to bring my Nintendo Switch and play with my employees at the time because of the very slow nights, I still didn't like it just because I was there too much. So I know at this point, we're like 9 minutes in, you may be thinking, well, what's the point of you saying all of this? You're just speaking a bunch of gibberish. And I kind of am. One thing about me is I'm going to keep it real. But if you look at that, those are all of my realities that I live and experience. Rather it's deja vu, rather it's something you do, or rather it's something you don't want to do. And me personally, I was inspired by Tragic Reality to speak this low quality gibberish, but at the same time, I do want you to think though. What reality are you currently living in now? Think about it. You have realities where you have good days. You have realities where you have bad days. You have realities where some days are insufferable and it's to the point they're sufferable and it's to the point where you wish you weren't even born. But then you have realities where you're at peace and you're like, yo, life is good. But life isn't really good, is it? It's just good at that moment. And to his point that I heard in many other his videos, a lot of people do spend a lot of time thinking about their past realities and their future realities, but don't really spend much time in their present reality. I mean, if you think about it, we always are in a different reality because we are trying to escape because our actual reality is boring. Just straight up boring. I mean, right now, I'll say I'm pretty bored. But I won't say I'm like bored to the point where it's sufferable. I'm like the peaceful bored because I'm out in nature and I'm in this nice area just chilling. Everyone is chill. Nobody has called the cops on me. But it just makes you think like I could be shifting into a reality right now where one of these people in these nice houses are calling the cops because they see a black man here holding a camera talking to himself like some weirdo about realities. I don't know because it's not the current reality. So every passing second, we are shifting in different realities. It just all depends on your own perspective on how you view it. For example, a customer giving you a rough time may be a terrible reality for you, but it may be a neutral reality for me. Well, let me separate that a bit further because I want to try to exclude the middle ground for this scenario. It may be a good reality for me. Why? Because I find it funny when people act like children over fake food in restaurants when we can just solve it just by giving them the same burger for free. Some people don't find it funny. Some people just want to be like, get out the drive-thru. But I find it entertaining because humans are dumb. In my previous video, I saw a comment. I'm assuming they watched the whole video. They just said humans are dumb, and I agree. Humans are pretty dumb. The cultural differences between Gen Zs and baby boomers, the differences of how we all perceive things with religion and even with the so-called God. Another thing that really hit The Rock was Tragic Reality. He said believing in God is like basically saying you believe in Santa Claus. And that's a really great analogy because no one can either prove or disprove that God exists. And who knows, maybe there is a reality we did see this God, but for all we know, God can be the very planet we live in. And why does it have to be God? What about goddess? The only things I see here that produce life is females. Why are we referring a being? And then what's so crazy about this, they will say, well, it's everything, but then you still refer it to as a he. Which I guess it makes sense. If it's everything, you might as well call it any one word, but I don't know. That's probably a controversial topic I'm going to get into another video, but it's just strange how we all are living in different realities and we all perceive things differently from one another. But really give it some thought. I'm not going to say try to remember every last detail you did the previous day because let's be real, the previous day doesn't matter because that reality is over. You're in the present. That's your current reality. Just like right now, as I'm recording, this is my present reality. And if you're watching this video, this is your present reality. But as soon as when you click off or decide to finish reviewing the whole video, that is no longer your reality. And when I think about realities, I wonder, I'm going to dive a bit deeper into the spiritual topics. People say we choose what families we are born in. And I can agree to disagree with that, but that's only because I have memories of my past lives. Now, I know this is starting to get confusing, so let me provide a bit of context. Someone scientifically stated it's impossible to think of anything you've never seen before. So, by that logic, if that's true, then past lives exist because I had dreams where I saw these beings, these creatures, these objects, and even different colors that I'd never seen in my reality before that doesn't exist here. Heck, there were even some creatures that I'd never seen in all the movies I watch. And keep in mind, all those movies are fiction. So that means there's a reality where those creatures, those colors, and those things do exist. And if past lives do exist, because if I'm going off based off of that logic, then we kind of choose where we want to be. But if that's the case, why do we choose to be born in such a tragic reality? I can go deeper into this in another video. Why do we choose to be born? That's also like me saying, why would tragic reality choose to be born in a narcissistic family? Well, I don't know if his whole family is. I just only heard about the stories about his mother. Why? Why don't we remember everything about our past lives or even before? Is some people newbies? Is this their first life? And for people like me who has lived more than one life, again, you just have to take my word, because it's impossible to prove that your past life exists in a different reality unless you can specifically find your previous dead body, which is probably deteriorated or in another reality. So it's like, what can you even do? But why are we picking if everything what I said is true, then why are we picking these tragic realities? Why? Did we came here to send a message? Because if that's the case, I already failed. I don't even remember what the message is. So can I go back to that energy form and leave? Because I already failed the mission if there was a message to begin with to speak out into this reality. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. Honestly, I don't know why that we are here. I don't know why. If what I'm saying is true, we chose to be here and chose to be born here. However, even if we did choose to be born here and that somehow gets proven, I do want to make this clear. We did not ask to be born in a system that just revolves with money in order for you to survive. I will make that clear. Even if somehow we did chose to be here for a reason, rather it's to send a message or maybe help Gaia, which is the planet we live in. Because honestly, if there's any god or goddess I'm gonna believe in, it's gonna be Gaia, because at least Gaia is the reason why we're alive. We need oxygen. In fact, people say this world sucks, but I disagree. It'd be better to rephrase that and say the people of this world sucks, because who honestly has done you more harm? Natural disasters or people? People. Because if you were the only person on earth, these thoughts wouldn't even come to your mind to begin with. I mean, think about it. Tragic reality wouldn't have those thoughts that he have. I wouldn't have these thoughts that I have. We wouldn't be questioning the very system and reality that we live in if it weren't for this. So let that sink in. But don't think about it too deep, because after all, in the end, our time is gonna come anyway. Even these people in these nice houses, which I'm gonna try to avoid showing too much because I don't want to leak the address. But in the end, it doesn't even matter, because we're all gonna die anyway. But I can't help but to wonder, if I lived in a reality where if I was the only person in the world or this modern system didn't exist, what would I even be thinking in my current reality?